Welcome back, everyone, from half term. I hope you managed to have some rest and a break from studying. We're now going to move on to looking at applying our knowledge of what we covered before half term into some exam questions. So firstly, we need to recall the knowledge that we covered before half term and then move on to application. So before you complete this PowerPoint, log on to Show My Homework and complete the quiz that I've set. If you don't know how to go on to Show My Homework, all you do is you click on RM Unify and there's a series of apps and there's an app for Show My Homework. It should come up automatically. If you can't find it or if you can't get the quiz up for some reason, just let me know and I'll sort it out for you. So the Sociology as a Science debate falls under the Theory and Methods section of the course. So you could get a question on theory and methods in paper 1 or paper 3. Paper 1 has just one 10-mark question on theory and or methods. So it could be a question about sociology as a science or about functionalism, Marxism, but it could also be a 10-mark question on the stuff we've covered this year on questionnaires or interviews. Sometimes they like to mix the questions together, so you might have a question asking how a theoretical perspective could affect a choice of method or something like that. So that's why I've put and or methods. It sometimes isn't neatly theory or methods. It can be a combination. Paper 3 has a 10-mark question and a 20-mark question on theory and or methods. So there's more of this content in paper 3. Here's what some questions could look like on the sociology as a science topic. So on paper 1 or paper 3, you could get an outline and explain question asking you to outline and explain 2 arguments against the view that sociology is a science. And we're going to dissect that question today, and you're going to write a section of it. On paper 3, you only get is the only place where you get the 20-mark questions. So it always starts applying material from item C, annual knowledge. And we're quite used to that starting sort of phrase. Assess the view that sociology can and should be considered a science. We're going to look at a question that's similar to this, but not exactly the same. So you can have a go at that one too, if you want to. So here's just some advice on how you would approach this 10-mark question. The command word is outline and explain. So there isn't really a need here to evaluate. So I've put here 2 Peel paragraphs. Here it's all about the explanation. So you really want to expand on the second E, the explanation after your evidence, and the L link back to the question. Make sure that you're answering the question that's set, not the question that's in your head. You don't need an introduction or a conclusion. You go straight into your first argument. So you would say one way or one argument against the view that sociology is a science is, and you would just go straight into the first point. In the exam, you would spend 15 minutes on this question. It's a minute and a half a mark. So what I've done here is I've written the first paragraph of this answer. What I would like you to do is just to read through the paragraph. Is there a clear point being made? Has a sociologist been used to support the point? Has the idea been explained in reference to the question? And is there anything else that you would add? Okay, so now you've had a look at that first paragraph. What I would like you to do is write a second paragraph to complete the answer. So I've given you some ideas that you could base your paragraph on. You could talk about Popper, how Popper argues that for something to be scientific, it has to go through a process of falsification. And because lots of ideas in sociology can't be falsified, we could say that sociology is not a science and shouldn't be considered a science. Remember, Popper makes that link to Marxism and talks about how false class consciousness is one of the concepts that we can't really falsify. There is no test to prove whether false class consciousness is in fact real and affecting people's behaviour. Another argument that you could make is Kuhn's arguments about paradigms. And he argues that science operates in paradigms and sociology currently does not. Currently, it's pre-paradigmatic. It's a pre-science or a young science. So really you can use him if you say that, well, we're not a fully fledged science yet because we haven't got this one single theory or paradigm or way of looking at and understanding social behaviour. Don't write about both of these in the same paragraph, because all that will happen is you're listing ideas. Really what you need to do is take one of these ideas and fully explain it. Okay, now we're going to look at a 20-mark question. So again, just some advice about how you would approach this question. It has an item. The item does not have to be used, but obviously items generally give you some clues as to how you could approach the question. So it's worthwhile reading through it and highlighting any arguments that you could use in your answer. So using the item, evaluate the view that it is desirable for sociology to be scientific. Now, be careful, because this question is not asking you whether it is scientific, it's asking you if it's desirable. Should we aim to study society in a scientific way? So for this question, you would want to aim for 4 paragraphs. So we would like to see some evaluation after each paragraph. You do need an introduction and a conclusion. They don't need to be lengthy. Again, in your introduction, like what we've practiced with other essays, you just need to kind of state your thesis or state what argument you're going to be making. So it's asking you to evaluate the view that it is desirable. Do most sociologists think that it's desirable or not? Is there a debate between positivists and interpretivists that you can highlight in your introduction? And obviously the same for the conclusion as well. Is it desirable? Is it really desirable to be scientific or not? Does it depend on what theoretical perspective you're coming from? And then you want to spend about 30 minutes in an exam answering this question. But of course, for now, you can spend longer, because we're just starting to answer these questions, and we'll build up to doing it in time conditions. So here's the item. So you might want to just at the moment pause the video and read through it and highlight the bits that are relevant. So I've given a table here of things that you could sort of talk about in the essay. So on the left-hand side of ways it is desirable for sociology to be scientific, in your first paragraph, you could use Comte's arguments. He said, remember that sociology should be considered scientific, and it's desirable because if you make sociology a science, you tend to get more funding, there's more prestige attached to scientific subjects, it's taken more seriously. So therefore it would be desirable to study the social world in the same way you do the natural world. And then the second paragraph, you can use Durkheim's arguments about laws of social behaviour can be discovered. So in the same way in the natural world, there are laws about gravity, there are laws about perhaps our social behaviour in society. So Durkheim actually kind of compares being a sociologist to being, like a medical doctor or something. If we try and study sociology in a scientific manner, we are essentially diagnosing and treating social problems in the same way you would in natural science. So diagnosing what are the social problems, what are the issues, and then coming up with some treatment, so how you can solve those social problems. For how it's undesirable, you can use Weber's arguments about how it's not actually appropriate to study society in a scientific way because it ignores free will. Really, to understand people's motivations and actions, we have to take an approach where we try to understand the meaning behind action using Verstehen. So remember, that's when you place yourselves in the shoes of the person or group that you're researching to really get to the bottom of why they behave the way they do. And so therefore this will be unique perhaps to different groups and different individuals. And so there won't be an overarching law of society that is there to be uncovered. And secondly, you can use the argument that it's undesirable because it's not possible for sociology to become scientific. If we have individual meanings and motivations that we can't see, it's not, you can't study empirically because we can't know motivations and meanings via our senses. it can't then be observed, and so therefore it can't be falsified. So you can use Popper there. If we can't see, feel, touch, sense something, if you think about labeling theory, it's not necessarily something that you can physically see or touch. We can't test it in the same way that you can test gravity. There are so many other variables that would affect, let's say, labeling, and we can't be sure that a teacher labeling a student is the actual reason why they succeed or underachieve. So because we can't use a test to prove or disprove that theory, arguably we can say that it's undesirable for it to be scientific. If you could try and write an answer to this question using the points from the table, I haven't put criticisms for each one. If you look in the textbook, I sent you the link before half term, and I'll send it again this time. There is different sections for evaluation for these points in the textbook, so have a look there. Remember to answer the question set, not the one that's in your head, because obviously what we've been looking at is whether sociology is a science or is not a science. And you kind of need to use that same material, but sort of twist it slightly to answer the question set about whether it's desirable for sociology to be scientific. You're using the same content, but the emphasis on how you're using it is slightly different. So just be careful that you're not answering whether sociology is or is not a science. That's all for today. Don't worry, if you do find this a little bit difficult, just email me a plan and I can help you to develop it and amend it where necessary. Thanks, take care, bye.